The camera opens on a quiet Tel Aviv evening, the city's skyline lit up but subdued. Crowds gather in Hostage Square, candles flickering in the night air as families and supporters hold up photos of their loved ones. Their eyes search the horizon for a sign that this time the promises from leaders will finally bring their relatives home. Moments earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had addressed the nation in a brief 5-minute televised speech. His tone was measured, yet carried a glimmer of relief. He told Israelis that he was hopeful all hostages will be released within days. His words echoed across living rooms, cafes and phones throughout Israel, offering something many here had not felt in nearly 2 years of conflict, a sense that an end might be in sight. The announcement came as Israel confirmed it had formed a new delegation to lead ceasefire talks under President Donald Trump's recently announced 20-point peace plan. At the same time, key U.S. negotiators, including Trump's senior advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, were heading to Cairo, where Egyptian officials had already set the stage for what could be the most consequential round of diplomacy since the war began. Netanyahu's optimism was striking. He said he aimed to conclude the talks within just a few days and specifically hoped to secure a breakthrough during the week-long Jewish festival of Sukkot, which begins Monday evening. In his words, Israel would not allow Hamas to drag the negotiations into a prolonged process. The Prime Minister's statement was as much a promise to his people as it was a signal to Hamas that the window for talks would be brief. Across Tel Aviv, the optimism was tempered by urgency. Tens of thousands poured into Hostage Square once again, carrying banners demanding swift action. Their chants rose into the night air, a plea to the government not to let political calculations stand in the way of saving lives. Similar scenes unfolded in Kiryat Gat, where relatives of hostages rallied, refusing to let the plight of their loved ones be sidelined. For nearly 2 years, these families have lived in a state of waiting, their grief frozen in time, their hopes kept alive by every new diplomatic overture. But for all the hopeful rhetoric, deep challenges remain. The most difficult obstacle centers on a demand that has defined much of the conflict: the demilitarization of Gaza. President Trump's peace framework stipulates that any lasting ceasefire must include steps toward disarming Hamas and establishing security guarantees for both sides. Hamas's initial response to the plan was described by mediators as positive, yet it came with caveats. Crucially, it avoided direct commitments on disarmament, leaving a gaping hole in the talks that diplomats now have to bridge. As night fell, the mood in Tel Aviv was one of cautious expectation. In conversations with families at the square, a recurring phrase surfaced: "This moment feels different." They have seen negotiations rise and collapse before. Yet the combination of Trump's direct involvement, Netanyahu's public urgency, and Hamas's apparent willingness to engage, however conditionally, gave them hope that history might not repeat itself this time. The next morning, attention shifted to Washington. In a post on his social media platform, President Trump confirmed that Israel has temporarily halted its bombing campaign to give the hostage release and the peace plan a chance. He coupled that announcement with a warning directed at Hamas, writing that the militant group needs to move quickly toward an agreement or all bets will be off. The White House press corps spent much of the day parsing Trump's remarks. His warning carried both a carrot and a stick, a window for diplomacy, but also a threat of renewed and possibly intensified military action should the talks stall. The Post underscored the stakes. After years of bloodshed and cycles of failed truces, the latest effort could prove to be the last serious chance to avoid another devastating round of conflict. Earlier in the week, Trump had met Netanyahu at the White House in what both men described as a critical conversation. At a joint press conference after their meeting, Netanyahu publicly backed Trump's 20-point plan, describing it as the best path yet to bring our people home and secure Israel's future. The plan's centerpiece demands the release of all hostages held by Hamas within 72 hours of an agreement. It also lays out a step-by-step roadmap for the governance of Gaza after the war, including provisions for reconstruction and security arrangements overseen by an international coalition. In a sign that the message was getting through, Hamas responded soon after the White House meeting, announcing that it was prepared to enter negotiations over the hostages. Yet it stopped short of endorsing the full 20-point framework, leaving ambiguity about its willingness to accept the disarmament clause, the linchpin of any sustainable peace deal. Trump, addressing reporters in the Oval Office following Hamas's statement, called it a big day. But he added a note of caution. We'll see how it all turns out. We have to get the final word down in concrete. Very importantly, I look forward to having the hostages come home to their parents. His remarks highlighted the central challenge, transforming verbal gestures of goodwill into a concrete, verifiable agreement. In Cairo, preparations were already underway as the various delegations began to converge. Egyptian officials, who have long served as key intermediaries in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, were preparing for marathon sessions that could stretch late into the night. For many diplomats involved, the stakes go beyond the immediate conflict. A breakthrough could set a precedent for how deeply divided adversaries, after years of bloodshed, might find a path back to dialogue. For Israelis, the urgency is personal. The hostages, men, women and children, have become the most powerful symbol of the war's toll. Each rally, each speech by leaders like Netanyahu is measured by one question: will it bring them home? In Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, a mother of one captive summed up the collective mood. We've heard promises before, but this time we pray it's real. We can't wait any longer. Back in Washington, Trump's advisors, including Kushner and Witkoff, briefed the press before boarding their flight to Cairo. They described the mission as a last push for a real deal, underscoring that US patience for endless talks was limited. Trump's warning about all bets being off was not, they said, mere rhetoric. It signalled a readiness to walk away if the opportunity for peace was squandered. As the diplomatic convoys rolled toward Cairo and the world's cameras prepared to follow every move, the atmosphere in both Israel and Gaza was one of tense anticipation. Markets in Tel Aviv opened cautiously higher, a reflection of investors' fragile optimism. In Gaza, residents waited warily, unsure whether to trust that the pause in fighting would last long enough to bring real relief. For now, the public words from both Netanyahu and Trump, the symbolic gatherings in Hostage Square, and the visible preparations in Cairo all point to a rare alignment of urgency and opportunity. Whether that alignment can withstand the weight of history, mistrust, and political calculations on all sides remains the unanswered question. As one seasoned diplomat in Cairo put it late in the evening, we've seen windows of peace open before only to slam shut. This time we need to push it wide and keep it from closing. The coming days will test that resolve. For the families of the hostages and the millions living under the shadow of war, each passing hour matters. And as the world watches, the voices from Tel Aviv to Washington to Cairo are united in one message: the time to act is now.